Why is all the crime being caused by black people? Well, a lot of crime is being caused by black people. I've talked about 1350 before, or I guess they say 1352 now, and I feel like I've effectively debunked this. By the way, this is a, how do you say, debunked isn't the right word, you know? Do black people commit a disproportionate amount of crime, violent crime? Yes. Is it because black people are dumb and gay? No. That assertion has been debunked. There's a very simple sociological explanation for it. Okay, I'm just going to go right into it. Are you ready for it? 1350, Part 2, Electric Boogaloo. Okay? So, over here in the United States, ignore Mexico, Canada, Cuba, so on, you know, in the United States. So, the United States, it's a country that exists, tragically, despite the best efforts of socialists worldwide. And the Great Lakes are really cool. You know, that's cool. What's not cool is slavery. Slavery happened. There was actually like a lot of it. Millions and millions of people. Then slavery ends. Thanks, Lincoln. And then we go down there and we decide that we're gonna engage in Reconstruction. We're gonna fuck up the South. You know, all these crazy fucking Confederate leaders who loved black people so much. They were literally willing to break from the Union over it. We're going to kill them. Sherman is going to go down there. Sherman is just going to just do a red line on the map and just sort of swoop through, just leave his mark, you know? And then we're going to go down there afterwards. We're going to find everyone who gave a slip and we're going to hang them publicly. And then Abe Lincoln got assassinated shortly after the Civil War ended, and his coward faced reformist Confederate sympathizing vice president cut Reconstructions short, you know, along with a few other things. It was bad. Lincoln should have lived. We would live in a better America today. He had correspondence with Marx. Reconstruction never got to be finished. Not good. And as a product of that, all the people who were running around raping and murdering and enslaving black people and then going to war with the North over it got to live. They got to live, and they got to stay in positions of power. There were plenty of positions of local and state authority. You know, I want you to imagine being a recently freed black former slave in a county where the population is 80% black, but the sheriff, the constable and shit are all white. What do you think you're going to do? Do you think you have legal rights? Like, really think about it for a second. Like this guy, the people who are in charge of the legal system are the same people who were like casually raping and murdering you yesterday. Do you think you have legal rights? No, you don't. No, you don't. Begin the Jim Crow era. Now, obviously, as time went on, you know, material conditions developed substantially, but the gap between black and white people was never fixed. The average IQ and level of educational attainment of American people rose in aggregate, including black people. A lot of this was motivated by factors like rampant industrialization, such as factories opening up in the North. America became an industrial powerhouse. At the beginning of the 20th century, we were not an industrial powerhouse. Nobody really considered the United States a world power, I think until after World War I, and it was cemented after World War II. We really kicked up the industrialization into high gear for the war effort, and in doing so, you need a lot of people working in the factories, right? Now, here's the problem. How the fuck, especially in World War II, do you get people working in the factories when all the men are over here dying in Normandy? Well, you get the undesirables, by which I mean women and black people, and some other groups, but you know, in large part these groups. This was a last hired, first fired situation where a lot of these people were brought in for emergency labor replacement and were fired as soon as the white people got back from the war. So towards the end of World War II, you're in a very interesting position here, where you have, especially in a lot of like larger East Coast American cities, you know, you have tenements that are occupied by ethnic minority groups and black people, because they're the ones filling up the factories with these terrible, terrible jobs. And you've got a bunch of non-factory worker black people, you know, all over America, but largely in the South, sharecropping and sort of living in the areas where their ancestors were enslaved. World War II ends, thankfully. And what happens after World War II? We paying attention? What happens after World War II? Well, the GI Bill gets put into action. All these white soldiers come back home, and they get to have their white picket fence, suburban, American dream bullshit. You know who didn't get it? Black soldiers. The black soldiers who fought didn't get that, and thus another incredibly powerful road towards generational wealth was denied black people in this country. So, avenues for wealth acquisition that were available to other marginalized groups were specifically kept from black people. There's a reason for this, okay? For the past, I want to say, 400 years, white people have been really nervous about black people, okay? We're nervous that one day we're going to get what's due. Now, I don't literally believe that any white person should be harmed because their ancestors did bad stuff to black people's ancestors. However, in the grand scale of human civilizational development, it is not unheard of, sometimes when given the opportunity, historically aggrieved groups act out their frustrations. Will this happen in America with black people? No, it won't. Black people are a fundamental part of American cultural development. We're never going to have that kind of... Black people are never going to rise up and try to destroy whitey or whatever. It ain't happening. It's not happening. It is a fear of reprisal, a common white supremacist narrative. You have to keep your boot down because if you give them a little bit of leeway, they rise up. The American sort of establishment has always been kind of wary of black development, and I think that's one of the big reasons why they were kept out of the GI Bill. A lot of it was also to avoid angering white supremacist Americans, or also known as white Americans at the time, who really don't like it when black people get roofs over their heads. It's a whole thing. They're just very vindictive. They're very emotional, these racists, okay? So why have I gone through all of this? Well, what I'm establishing right now are the material conditions that lead to a set of economic realities. Where are black people in the United States? What are they doing? And what's about to happen? Well, a lot of parts of the United States right now, at this point are caught in a kind of economic transitory period, namely between agrarian, sharecropping, sort of rural, semi-industrial, statewide development, and like full-on everyone live in the cities, everyone live in the pod, everyone work in the factory, like industrial revolution bullshit, right? And you've got all these cities with high ethnic populations, minorities, black people, blah-de-blah. And then what happens? Quick succession, folks. You got it. Death of manufacturing, drug war. Bam, 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 bam. Kablam. These inner city areas that were vibrant hubs of industrial activity experienced a phenomena called white flight. See, when the GI Bill got passed after World War II, all these white families, they're not going to live in the inner city anymore. They're going to go and live away from black people in the suburbs that were built for the white people. So white families, and therefore a lot of wealth that they carry, because remember, it's Jim Crow. Black people don't have equal economic attainment. If white people leave a family, they're bringing a lot of that city's, or leave a city, they're bringing a lot of that city's wealth with them, leaving disproportionately black and disproportionately poor communities at the base of these cities. And then you have the death of manufacturing. That is to say, the Rust Belt, we no longer produce the vast stores of American wealth by building cars in big factories right up next to a river. And point two, the drug war. The drug war was a plot by the Nixon administration to persecute anti-war protesters and people of color by associating them with different drugs. You can't make illegal being black, but you can make illegal having a good time. So, drug war and death of manufacturing and white flight. What does that do to a city? Guys, you've got a bunch of black people in a city. They have no opportunities for economic attainment in their area. They have basically no opportunities to leave elsewhere due to redlining, historical and contemporary. They don't have the money to make big crazy decisions about where they're going to live, at least not on average. And the jobs in their place are driving up because businesses are leaving because there's no money to sustain them. What happens? That's right, you turn to crime. You do the exact same thing that the Italians and the Irish did back in the 1920s. If you wonder why there were so many criminal elements to the Irish and Italian ethnic groups back in the 1920s, the answer is simple. We didn't give them other ways of surviving. It is that simple. It's not any more complicated than that. Black people in certain parts of America have been given, through historical social forces, family to family, generation to generation, neighborhoods which are not conducive towards economic attainment. And in those environments, they often turn to drugs as a mechanism for making money. And if you are peddling drugs, you need a gang because you can't go to the police if you are wronged. You need an external system of protection and enforcement. So the gang serves that purpose. And of course, in the absence of responsible policing and police integration that's sort of community oriented, many of these gangs act as a kind of de facto community police, sometimes to the benefit of the neighborhood, but often not. Because as it turns out, in a material sense, community defense is not best enacted by a bunch of criminal drug runners who have highly antagonistic attitudes towards, the rundown neighborhoods they live in. That just tends not to be like the bedrock of effective community defense. That is what produces disproportionate black crime. It's not all black people. It's inner cities and overwhelmingly gang or gang-adjacent violence. It's that simple. Really, it is. Most crime, especially violent crime, is caused by proximity to economic inequality. Poor neighborhoods on their own, not too much crime. Wealthy neighborhoods, not too much. But the boundaries between wealth and poverty. Take Skid Row in Los Angeles. Where is Skid Row? Right off of Union Station. Historically, one of the biggest transportation and trade hubs in the city. A lot of wealth runs through there. 2 blocks away, you've got people dying in the streets. It is the adjacency. It's areas carved out by wealth and left to rot. It's areas that don't have the civic, communal culture to care for one another because of mutual distrust and predatory behavior on the part of the police and the gangs that look to replace them. It's that simple. It happened with other ethnic groups. Everything people say 1350, 1350, 1350, and then they celebrate that fascist bitch who just went up in Italy. The Italians were the 1350 100 years ago. They were the 1350. Before all the factors that I'm talking about, black people weren't all in it. 1920s America didn't have black people doing a ton of crime in the inner city. That was the fucking Italians. They were the 1350. And what happened? Well, eventually they were able to benefit from systems of economic attainment that weren't available to non-white people. And then they evened out. Do you understand how when people say 1350, they betray their ignorance on the subject? This is an empirically falsifiable talking point. If you genuinely believe that disproportionate rates of crime being committed by African Americans is evidence of some kind of innate biological problem, then be reminded of this. The material role that black people fill in the United States, the underclass, is one that this country has always had and will have, even if you somehow got rid of all the black people. Leaving aside the fact that the mass exodus or murder of all black Americans would cause more suffering, strife, and crime than a millennia of any projected crime rates from that population, more than a millennia. Leaving aside that fact, you know who else? It'd just be the Italians again, or it'd be the Irish, or something. It'd be something. Because it's caused by material conditions. It is that simple. America has a lot of crime. We have a lot of income inequality. There are other countries with less crime and less income inequality. They tend to go along. They tend to work in tandem. It is causative.